hath many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. For in the one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, Jews or Greeks, slaves or free, and we were all made to drink of one Spirit. Indeed, the body does not consist of one member, but of many. If the foot would say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. And if the ear were to say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? If the whole body were hearing, where would the sense of smell be? But as it is, God arranged the members in the body, each one of them as he chose. If all were a single member, where would the body be?
These last few weeks, we have been working with Troy Bronson's book called Drawn In. It is a book that tells us about a design theory. It's a process of working through kind of how we see the world and how we're drawn into the world to participate with it. I think of that as being a discernment process. There are all kinds of discernment processes out there, and this is one that describes things in a little bit different way. We've been working with dreaming, with coming up with thoughts and ideas, right? And then hovering over those dreams a bit and just sitting with them and seeing what they bring out in us. What are some of the things that are evoked in who we are based on some of those dreams and ideas. And then the risking, letting go of some of those assumptions that we might have carried with us as we become more and more aware of what we're doing in our world, how we're participating in life, listening to one another, and being very aware of who we are in relationship with, that intentional listening and what that brings to our learning and our knowledge with one another. And today we are working with reintegrating. Now, Troy Bronson would say that reintegrating is taking the time to think through all the things that we've learned in the previous 4 steps of the process, in the dreaming, the hovering, the risking, and the listening. What have we learned from that? And how can we use it? How do we participate in that in order to step out a little bit differently into our world with one another? So reintegration is something that we can't do by ourselves. We have to do it in the midst of a community, talking together with one another, and knowing exactly how our relationships connect us to one another, how we are interconnected as a species, as a community of faith, as friends, as relatives, as all those things that bring us together with all the rest of creation, not just people, but the whole planet, the whole cosmos, everything. How can we test out what we think we know or what we're thinking about the things that we've heard with one another? Because the whole joy of being in community with one another is being able to say some of your dreams aloud and seeing what other people think about them. Participating with us in our dreams helps connect us in community with one another. That's what community is all about. So Troy says it this way: newly created things are defined by their relationship to the environment. Nothing exists in isolation. It is always the relationship of things that are being determined as they are created. So we are intercreated with one another, and we are connected. So to reintegrate what we think we know about the world means to think those dreams aloud, test them out with one another, bounce them off of each other, see what works, what doesn't work, try it on, see if it fits. If it doesn't fit, move on to a different thing, maybe make some adaptations, and then work through it all again. That's what reintegrating what we know is all about. That's how processes work. The iterations over and over again of ideas and thoughts bring us to new patterns and new possibilities all the time. Margaret Wheatley, who was just with us over the weekend with Center for Faith Studies, says it this way: everything we observe is not a separate thing, but a participant in a vast web of relationships. Living systems and the universe are best understood as dense layers of networked relationships. Even a single cell is a complex network, far beyond the imaginings of scientists until a few years ago. Nothing living lives alone. We are interconnected with one another, and what we think together helps define who we are as community, helps us test things out together, try things on, and then step out into the world in a brand new way. It's the whole point of discernment, right? How do you live into it? What do you bring to the world? Where does your voice enter the world, and how does it make a wave in the world? How do we affect the world around us? We are in community with one another. Scientists have recently been talking about this relational concept in the world, and it's happening both at the micro and the macro levels of creation, not just in personal relationships, but even down to the level of particles. Scientists have taken electrons, for example, and separated electrons just to see how they would react to one another if they were separated. When one of the electrons moved, the other one moved too. It mimicked it. The behaviors of each of the electrons were directly correspondent with one another, even when separated. So they wondered if distance would matter. So they put one in New York and one in California. When one moved, the other one moved too. See, we're in relationship, right? When I speak, you speak. There you go. That's how it works. We affect each other that way, even at the particle level. And it doesn't matter how far we're separated. This whole idea in science is called entanglement. We are entangled with one another, even at this very particle level. We mimic each other, we work with each other, we respond to one another. We are connected. So as we mimic the creative world, then we as people should come together and be able to talk to one another and share our dreams and our hopes with one another. Mimic each other in a way that helps us move on to a brand new way of being in the world. So I'm going to ask you all to do that for me today. I can't do reintegration for you. You have to do it with each other. So we're going to take some time and talk to one another today. So if you would help me do that, that would be great. You can break into different groups of 3 to 4 people. Get up, move around, go to people that you know that you're comfortable with, or just stay and turn around and talk to your neighbor. It can be done even in this facility, and it's a lot of fun. So I encourage you to turn now and talk to your neighbors about these 2 issues. What new thoughts or ideas have you discovered since being in partnership with our Jewish and Muslim faith? For those of you who have participated in a lot of the programming at the Tri-Faith, you've had experience with this. So what kinds of things have you shared with our faith partners since we've been here? We've been here now almost 7 months. So what are you learning from that experience with one another? Turn around and share that with your neighbor. We'll take about 5-6 minutes. Okay. How's that feel to reintegrate some of the things that you've been thinking about? Does it feel pretty easy to turn around and talk to your neighbor? Is it people, how many of you are speaking with people you already knew? Yeah. How many of you are speaking with people you've never met before? Right? Reintegrating means taking all your joys and concerns out of your mind and your body, which are, your heart, your favorite places to be dreaming and hovering and all that kind of stuff, but then testing them out, throwing it out there to see how the rest of the world responds to it. That's what brings joy to a community. So whether you know the person or whether you've just met somebody for the first time, the community expands and our whole perception and our vision as a communal group expands, and our vision becomes much broader and includes all different kinds of people, right? That's the whole experiment of the Tri-Faith. So as we listen to some music, I'd like you to think about those things that you just heard from your discussions, as well as something that you maybe didn't say that you wanted to say, or something that you heard from somebody else that you'll carry with you and pray for throughout the week, okay? We'll step on and do some more a little bit later.
I've walked among the shadows, you wiped my tears away. I felt the pain of heartbreak, I've seen the brighter days. And I prayed prayers to heaven from my lowest place. I have held your blessings, God, you give and take away. No matter what I have, your grace is enough. No matter where I am, I'm standing in your love. On the mountains I will bow my life to the one who set me there. And
ago, the Dalai Lama asked a group of professionals, including friends who told me the story, "What is the cause of suffering?" Everybody had an answer: poverty, injustice, war, alienation, racism. After listening to their answers, he abruptly interrupted them and said, "No, the cause of suffering is when good people begin their work together and then fail to notice what is arising between them."
Even at our most chaotic, even in the midst of our wildest devastations with one another, Margaret Wheatley would say that our most noble qualifications as human beings are there and available to us, and that our characteristics of what it means to be most fully human will rise up in order to allow us to stand with one another, help one another, teach one another, console one another, and care for one another, even in the most desperate strains of despair. She calls these people warriors for the human spirit. I believe we are those people. We are people who turn to one another and care and concern for one another as we are walking through places and circumstances where we've never been before and we have no idea where we're going. There is chaos and devastation all around us all the time, and yet in community we turn to one another. She says, "We need leaders who recognize the harm being done to people and planet through the dominant practices that control, ignore, abuse, and oppress the human spirit. We need leaders who put service over self, stand steadfast in crises and failures, and who display unshakable faith that people can be generous, creative, and kind." In our turning to one another, those characteristics will come out in us and make us warriors for the human spirit. All of our behavior and what we're doing here at the Tri-Faith has already shown us that. We are becoming those people who are leaders in learning on how to accept the unpredictable, expect the unpredictable, and be able to stay constant and strong in the midst of it because we are in community with one another. We are interconnected. We can support one another. We can bring out those noble qualities in each other: creativity, kindness, consolation, care. We've been doing that together as a community, and we will continue to do that. It's part of who we are called to be as a community on the Tri-Faith Commons. Our clergy of the Tri-Faith have already noticed a significant difference in our behaviors with not only one another, but how we do our ministries. I will not plan a program or talk about my community without also including the temple and the mosque. I plan programming where I make sure that we invite all the folks. Our women's lunch, for instance, has just expanded threefold because we have people from all the other faith traditions joining us now. When I have a friend that I go to lunch with, or I've met and have become close friends with at the temple, if their husband is in the hospital, I go make a visit. My congregation has expanded beyond these walls to include all of them. And theirs have done the same for us. Our behaviors have already changed. We already are interconnected with one another. And individually, our behaviors have changed. Our neighbor-to-neighbor dinners have brought us together in order to learn how we are connected with one another. So in the midst of who we are and how we relate to one another, how we are changing the way we behave together, even in the midst of unpredictability, of not knowing where this whole grand experience is going to take us, we bring out the best in each other. So I'd like you to turn back into your groups for a little while. You can get up and change groups even if you want to. And think about these things. What have you seen or experienced that has brought back faith in the human spirit? How have people treated you that you've been part of the beneficiary of those warriors for the human spirit that have raised you up? And then how have you yourself been a warrior for the human spirit, concentrating on those things that put people at the center? In our whole tri-faith relationship, we are putting people at the center of all of our efforts. Not our religious doctrines, not our nationalities, not our politics, none of those things. People, caring for people, is the center of what we do. Where have you done that? Turn and talk to one another. you going to stay? Okay, we have to come back together. And I have some more to say, which is always the case, right? But apparently we have an announcement about a dog that is lost that they're trying to find the owners to. Do you want to speak? You can come right here.
Hi, I'm Ann.
Turn that on first,
We are looking for somebody who lives in this general area who has access to the Nextdoor app so we can post his picture because he has a little friend who's still running around that we still can't catch. But we just need access to post so that maybe someone in the neighborhood could. Awesome. Thank you.
Margie to the rescue. Yay, thank you, Margie. So, conversations, reintegrating, some of the things that we know about each other. A couple weeks ago, we talked about what our mantra is here at Countryside and how that gives us an identity, that gives us a ground to stand on so that we can risk a few things and step out in new ways just to see what happens. We are loved beyond our wildest imaginations. We are God's children in the world. That is our identity. That's who we are. That's what we stand on as we come together in our communal identity within that same frame and be able to risk things as we step out to try new things, be in new conversations with new people, expand our visions and our perceptions with one another about how we can participate most fully in the life that we lead together. When we do this, we are reintegrating everything we learn. And that process starts all over again after a little bit of rest, and you'll get the rest next week. But that's what this whole process comes down to. You're learning a bunch of stuff. You're hearing a bunch of things. You're taking in a bunch of information. You're experiencing life all around you. And now what do you do with all that stuff? How do you process it? You turn to one another. You be in conversation with one another. You risk some ideas about things. And you help one another, even in the worst conditions, even in the most chaotic and devastating of times. That's the thing that keeps us sane. Margaret Wheatley calls them islands of insanity. I have been quoting Margaret Wheatley incessantly over the last 3 weeks, and I've got one more quote, because it's the quote that will bring us the courage to stand together with one another and be interconnected. And then I won't mention Margaret Wheatley again for a little while. But you should all read her stuff because she's tremendous. Meg Wheatley says, whatever the problem, community is the answer. So I hope that we go out today with courage in that statement. That in turning to one another, we don't have to risk a thing, but we can practice and we can imagine and dream and step out in fabulous new ways in order to most fully participate in life. Amen. One of the best ways to join together in community is in this meal, literally called communion, right? Together we are called to remember who we are and how we came together, what our identity is, and what grounds us. And the night in which he was betrayed, Jesus took bread, broke it, gave thanks, and gave it to his disciples, saying, "This is my body. Do this in remembrance of me." The very ground that we stand on, the solid ground that gives us courage to reach out to something new. Do this in remembrance of me. And again after supper, he took the cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to all to drink, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, shed for you and for all people." A new covenant, a new way of behaving in the world as a community. Do this in the remembrance of me. As we participate in this meal together with one another, we take in everything we know about being alive. Not only what we know, but in all the saints before us. It's all part of who we are, and we carry it with us everywhere we go. This is our strength for the weeks ahead. So as we come together, you do not have to believe in any particular dogma or doctrine to participate in this meal. If you'd like to participate right from where you're sitting, just raise your hand and we'll have the server come to you and serve you there. But if you do come forward, we hope that you will take a piece of the bread from the loaf. Just tear a piece off, the bigger the better. And you can dip it in either the juice or the wine, whichever you prefer. And as you take it in, realize that all of what has gone before us has led us to this point. We are in community with one another. Christ was that community in and for us. And we are joining that community as we step out into the world. As our servers come forward to prepare our meal, let us say together those words that keep us together in a community with one another. We are an inclusive, open, and affirming family of faith, welcoming all to God's table of love and acceptance. We are diverse, yet united by Christ's example. We care for one another, support one another, and challenge one another to become all that God creates us to be. We work together to nurture our community and to promote peace and justice in our conflicted world. Does that sound a lot like warriors for the human spirit? Everybody say amen. Amen. These are the gifts of the God for the people of God. Please come.